We've got a disturbing report from the medical advocacy group called Do No Harm. It confirms, catch this, that the United States is the most permissive country when it comes to the legal and medical transgender of children, gender transition surgeries of children. We're the worst. The report compares the United States with 11 Western European countries, and it found that while Europe is trending towards a safer and more scientific route, extreme gender ideology here in the United States is driving us to provide transgender medical care to younger and younger children. Joining me right now to discuss this and more is Dr. Stanley Goldfarb. He's a chairman of Do No Harm, which is the group that published the report that I just referenced. He is a board-certified kidney specialist and former professor and associate dean for curriculum at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. Dr. Goldfarb, welcome to Washington Watch. We appreciate you joining us this evening.
Thank you. Great to be with you, Jody.
Well, thank you so much. All right, let's go to your report. It found that when it comes to gender procedures performed on children, and this was so disturbing, gender procedures performed on children, the United States and many European countries are headed in opposite directions. Is that correct?
That is correct. Europe started this earlier, and over the years now, several countries, there are 4 European countries now that have actually put a ban into place for various transitions of children through medical actions to change their gender. And the United Kingdom most recently reviewed the literature on this and said, this is something that we have no idea what the risk-benefit ratio of this is. In other words, we have no idea how many children are being severely harmed by entering into these protocols. And, our organization did the research on this, and it's quite clear that the United States is, in fact, the most permissive country. And what's even more disturbing is the fact that in the United States, unlike the European countries, there really is a lot more of the Wild West attitude towards this. There are individuals and institutions that aren't even following the guidelines that have been published about this by various societies in the United States. For example, they're not entering the children into mental health evaluations, which is a critical issue. All the European countries are very clear that they see these children as potentially being quite troubled, and they need to be evaluated to a great depth to make sure about their mental health stability. For example, many of these children are on the autism spectrum. Many of these children have depression, anorexia, and other severe psychological problems that require treatment. And the United States is sometimes this is done in the most pro forma way. So it's very disturbing. Our organization has been working with 2 individuals, and if I could just describe them to your audience, I think it would be helpful. One is a woman named January Littlejohn, a mother, a mental health worker in Florida, whose young daughter was started into socially transitioning. In other words, changing her name, changing her pronouns, cutting her hair short, and so on. And this was done at her school. And Mrs. Littlejohn wasn't even informed about this. And subsequently, the child has detransitioned. But Mrs. Littlejohn has been pursuing this through legal means to pointing out that this school district in Florida had actually done this to her child without her input. So crucial is to have families completely involved in any of the concerns they have about their children. And yet this didn't happen in that case. And there are many other cases like that. And the other, if I could describe the other person, because I think this will be informative, is a young woman named Chloe Cole. Chloe Cole is a beautiful girl now. She's 18 years old. When Chloe was 16, she had her breasts removed. She had gone through this transition process. First, it's a social transition, as I described for January Littlejohn's child. Then they get put on puberty blockers, which prevents their puberty from proceeding. And then they get put on sex hormones, and Chloe had her breasts removed. And after this, she realized that this was a mistake and that, in fact, she is a woman. She wants to be a woman. She's a beautiful young woman. And she's also working with us to point out that there is a population of individuals that are so-called detransitioners, and it may be, but we have no idea the numbers because this is the sort of thing that's not really been paid much attention to, but it may be as high as 25, 30% over the short term of individuals, children who go through these transitions. So this is a real problem. The United States clearly has individuals, children going through some of these procedures at far earlier ages than we see in Europe. In Europe, you can't have the surgery until you're at least 18. And as I said, many countries now, 4 countries at least, have banned this altogether.
Well, it is so incredibly disturbing. And I think the word picture, the imagery that you gave at the Wild West is certainly something that we can identify here. It appears to me, it seems to me that the United States has embraced this extreme transgender ideology, and it has happened so swiftly here in the United States, but it does not seem to have done so in Europe. I mean, they seem to be actually following science. So why the difference between the United States and Europe right now? We've only got a couple of minutes left here.
Well, again, there are a few countries in Europe. You know, the United States is a big place with a lot of different kinds of people and a lot of different kinds of activities going on. It's a huge landmass compared to a country like Norway, for example, that has 4 million people. So that's part of it. And part of it is just the fact that, you know, there is a lot of freedom in our country. That's great. We like that. But in this situation and in this circumstance, I think we really have gone in a terrible direction. All of these mental disorders that I described, they've been attributed to the fact that these children need to have their gender changed, need to have their sex changed, which obviously is biologically impossible. And yet, in fact, the problem is, in fact, the other way. In fact, the children have psychological problems that need to be addressed. And I must say, in Canada, it's actually illegal to take these children and treat them with psychological therapy and psychiatric therapy before they undergo any kind of transition. It's illegal. A physician who does that can be put in jail over this. And in Europe, it's quite clear that under every country's protocol, intense psychological evaluation must go on before anything is done to a child. And in fact, in those 4 countries, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and the United Kingdom, this whole activity has been put to a halt, which is what really should happen in the United States. And now we're talking about children. You know, adults is something else. Adults have the freedom to do this, but a 12-year-old child or a 14-year-old child cannot give consent in any way that makes any sense. Any of us that deal with children know very well, they change their minds all the time. And this is a terrible thing to put a child through.
Dr. Goldfarb, thank you so much for joining us on Washington Watch and for being on the cutting edge of this issue. We greatly appreciate your efforts. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.